Acts chapter 9. Now Saul, still breathing out threats and murder against the Lord's disciples, went to the Kohen Gadol. He requested letters of introduction from him to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any men or women belonging to the way, he might bring them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he was traveling, approaching Damascus, suddenly a light from heaven flashed up around him. Falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul said. "I am Yeshua, whom you are persecuting. But get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." The men traveling with him stood speechless, hearing the voice but seeing no one. Saul got up from the ground, but opening his eyes he could see nothing. They led him by the hand and brought him into Damascus. For 3 days he could not see, and he did not eat or drink. Now there was a disciple named Ananias in Damascus. The Lord said to him, "Ananias." He said, "Here I am, Lord." The Lord said to him, "Get up and go to the street named Straight, and ask in the house of Judah for someone from Tarsus named Saul. For look, he is praying, and in a vision he has seen a man named Ananias coming in and laying his hands on him, so that he might regain his sight." But Ananias answered, "Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much harm he has done to your Kedoshim in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the ruling Kohanim to tie up all who call on your name." But the Lord said to him, "Go, for he is a choice instrument to carry my name before nations and kings in Bnei Israel, for I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake." So Ananias left and entered into the house. Laying hands on Saul, he said, "Brother Saul, the Lord Yeshua, the one who appeared to you on the road by which you were coming, he has sent me so that you might regain your sight and be filled with a Ruach HaKodesh." Immediately something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he regained his sight. Then he got up and was immersed, and when he had taken food, he was strengthened. Now for several days he was with the disciples in Damascus. Immediately he began proclaiming Yeshua in the synagogue, saying, "He is Ben Elohim." All those hearing him were amazed. They were saying, "Isn't this the one who made havoc in Jerusalem for all those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to bring them as prisoners before the ruling Kohanim?" But Saul kept growing stronger, and he was confounding the Jewish people living in Damascus by proving that Yeshua is the Messiah. When many days had passed, these Jewish people plotted to kill him, but their plot became known to Saul. They were watching the gates day and night to kill him, but the disciples took Saul by night and let him down over the wall, lowering him in a basket. When Saul arrived in Jerusalem, he made attempts to join up with the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him in and brought him to the emissaries. He described them how Paul had seen the Lord on the road, and the Lord had spoken to him, and how he had spoken boldly in the name of Yeshua. So Saul was with them, going in and out in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. He was speaking and arguing with the Hellenites, but they were trying to kill him. When the brothers found out, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus. So Messiah's community throughout all Judea and Galilee and Samaria had shalom and was built up. Walking in the fear of the Lord and in the comfort of the Ruach HaKodesh, it kept multiplying. Peter went here and there among them all. He came down as well to the Kedoshim living in Lydda. There he found a man named Aeneas, who had been bedridden for 8 years. He was paralyzed. Peter said to him, "Aeneas, Messiah Yeshua heals you. Get up and pack up your bed." Immediately he got up. All who lived in Lydda and plain of Sharon saw him, and they turned to the Lord. In Joppa there was a disciple named Tabitha, which translates as Dorcas. She was full of mitzvot and tzedakah, which she continually did. In those days she became ill and died. When they had washed her for burial, they placed her in an upstairs room. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples, hearing that Peter was there, sent 2 men to him, begging him, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. When he arrived, they took him to the upstairs room. All the widows were crying, showing all the tunics and other clothing Dorcas had made while she was with them. But Peter sent them all outside, and he got down on his knees and prayed. Then, turning to the body, he said, "Tabitha, get up." She opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and raised her up. Then he called the Kedoshim and widows and presented her alive. It became known throughout Joppa, and many came to believe in the Lord. So it happened that Peter stayed in Joppa for several days with Simon, a tanner. Chapter 10. Now in Caesarea there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion that was called the Italian cohort. He was a devout man, revering God with all his household. He gave tzedakah generously to the people and prayed to God continually. After the 9th hour of the day, he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God coming and saying to him, "Cornelius." He stared at him in terror and said, "What is it, Lord?" The angel said to him, "Your prayers and tzedakah have gone up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa and call for Simon, also named Peter. He is being entertained as a guest by Simon the tanner, whose house is beside the sea." When the angel speaking to him had left, he called 2 of his servants and a soldier from among those attached to his command. After he explained everything to them, he sent them to Joppa. The next day, as the soldiers were traveling and approaching the city, Peter went up to the rooftop to pray at about the 6th hour. But now he became very hungry and wanted to eat. But while they were preparing something, he fell into a trance. He saw the heavens opened, and something like a great sheet coming down, lowered by its 4 corners to the earth. In it were all sorts of 4-footed animals and reptiles and birds of the air. A voice came to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "Certainly not, Lord, for never have I eaten anything unholy or unclean." Again a voice came to him a second time, "What God has made clean, you must not consider unholy." This happened 3 times, and the sheet was immediately taken up to heaven. Now while Peter was puzzling about what the vision he had seen might mean, behold, the men sent by Cornelius found Simon's house and appeared before the gate. They called out and began to ask whether Simon, also called Peter, was staying in this place as a guest. Now while Peter was mulling over the vision, the Ruach said to him, "Look here, 3 men are looking for you, but get up, go downstairs, and go with them without hesitating, because I myself have sent them." Going down to the men, Peter said, "Here, I'm the one you're looking for. What is the reason for your coming?" And they said, "Cornelius, a centurion, a righteous and God-fearing man, well spoken by all the Jewish people, was directed by a holy angel to summon you to his house and to hear a message from you." So Peter invited them in to be his guests. The next day he got up and went with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa accompanied him. The following day he entered Caesarea. Cornelius was waiting for them and had called together his relatives and close friends. As Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter pulled him up, saying, "Stand up, I too am just a man." Talking with them, Peter went inside and found many people gathered. He said to them, "You yourself know that it is not permitted for a Jewish man to associate with a non-Jew or to visit him. Yet God has shown me that I should call no one unholy or unclean. So I came without objection when I was sent for. I ask then, what is the reason why you sent for me?" Cornelius declared, 4 days ago at this hour I was praying mincha, which is the 9th hour, 3 p.m., time of afternoon prayer, in my house. Suddenly a man stood in front of me in shining clothes. He says, Cornelius, your prayer has been heard, and your tzedakah remembered before God. Therefore send to Joppa and ask for Simon, who is also called Peter. He is staying in the house of Simon the tanner by the sea. So I sent for you immediately, and you have been kind enough to come. Now then, we are all here before God to hear all that you have been commanded by the Lord. Then Peter opened his mouth and said, I truly understand that God is not one to show favoritism, but in every nation the one who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. You know the message he sent to Bnei Israel, proclaiming shalom through Messiah Yeshua. He is Lord of all. You know the message that has spread throughout all Judea, beginning from Galilee after the immersion that John proclaimed. You know how God anointed Yeshua of Nazareth with the Ruach HaKodesh and power, how he went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed by the devil because God was with him. We are witnesses to all he did, both in the Judean countryside and in Jerusalem. They put him to death by hanging him on a tree, but God raised him up on the 3rd day and caused him to be visible, not to all the people, but to us, witnesses who were chosen beforehand by God. We ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead, and he commanded us to proclaim to the people and to testify that he is the one ordained by God as judge of the living and the dead. All the prophets testify about him that everyone who puts his trust in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. While Peter was still speaking these words, the Ruach HaKodesh fell on all those hearing the message. All the circumcised believers who came with Peter were astonished, because the gift of the Ruach HaKodesh had been poured out even on the Gentiles, for they were hearing them speaking in tongues and magnifying God. Then Peter answered, Can anyone refuse water for these to be immersed, who have received the Ruach HaKodesh just as we did? So he commanded them to be immersed in the name of Messiah Yeshua, and they asked him to stay for a few days. Chapter 11. Now the emissaries and brothers throughout Judea heard that the Gentiles also had received the word of God. But when Peter went up to Jerusalem, those of the circumcision took issue with him, saying, You went to uncircumcised men and ate with them. So Peter began explaining to them point by point, saying, I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in the trance I saw a vision, something like a great sheet coming down, being lowered from heaven by its 4 corners, and it came right to me. I looked inside, considering it carefully, and saw 4-footed creatures of the earth, wild animals, reptiles, and birds of the air. I also heard a voice saying, Get up, Peter, kill and eat. But I said, Certainly not, Lord, for never has anything unholy or unclean entered my mouth. But a voice from heaven answered a second time, What God has made clean, you must not consider unholy. This happened 3 times, and then everything was pulled up to heaven. At that very moment, 3 men arrived at the house where we were sent to me from Caesarea. The Ruach told me to go with them without hesitating. These 6 brothers also went with me, and we entered the man's house. He reported to us how he had seen an angel standing in his house, saying, Send to Joppa and bring Simon called Peter. He will speak words to you by which you will be saved, you and all your household. As I began to speak, the Ruach HaKodesh fell on them, just as on us at the beginning. And I remembered the word of the Lord, how he used to say, John immersed with water, but you will be immersed in the Ruach HaKodesh. Therefore, if God gave them the same gift as also to us after we put our trust in the Lord Yeshua Messiah, who was I to stand in God's way? When they heard this, they became quiet, and they glorified God, saying, Then even to the Gentiles God has granted repentance leading to life. Now those scattered because of the persecution had happened in connection with Stephen traveled as far as Phoenicia and Cyprus and Antioch, telling the message only to Judeans. However, there were some of them, men of Cyprus and Cyrene, who came to Antioch and began speaking to the Hellenites, also proclaiming the Lord Yeshua. The hand of the Lord was with them, and great number who believed turned to the Lord. News about these things reached the ears of the community in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. When he arrived and saw the grace of God, he was thrilled. He encouraged them all to remain true to the Lord with heartfelt devotion. For Barnabas was a good man, full of the Ruach HaKodesh and faith, and a large number was added to the Lord. When Barnabas left for Tarsus to look for Saul, and when he had found him, he brought him to Antioch. For a whole year they met together with Messiah's community and taught a large number. Now it was in Antioch that the disciples were first called Christianoi. Now in these days prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them, named Agabus, stood up and predicted through the Ruach that there was going to be a great famine over all the world. This took place during the reign of Claudius. So the disciples decided to send relief to those brothers and sisters living in Judea, each according to his ability. This they did, sending it to the elders by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. Chapter 12. Now at the time Herod the king seized some from Messiah's community to do them harm. He had Jacob's, John's brother, put to death with the sword. Seeing it pleased the Judean leaders, he proceeded to capture Peter as well. This was during the day of Matzah. After seizing him, he put him in prison, handing him over to 4 squads with 4 soldiers each to guard him. He was intending to bring him before the people after Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but prayer for him was being offered fervently to God by Messiah's community. Now that very night when Herod was about to bring him out, Peter was sleeping, bound with 2 chains between 2 soldiers, while guards before the gate were keeping watch over the prison. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. He poked Peter on the side and woke him up, saying, "Get up, quick!" And the chains fell off his hands. Then the angel said to them, "Get dressed and put on your sandals," and he did so. Then he tells him, "Put on your cloak and follow me." Peter went out and kept following him. He didn't know that what was happening with the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. After they passed the first guard and the second, they came to the iron gate leading into the city. It opened for them by itself. They went out and walked along a narrow street. Suddenly the angel left him. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know for real that the Lord has sent his angel and delivered me from the hand of Herod and from all that Judean people were expecting." When he realized this, he went to the house of Miriam, the mother of John, also called Mark, where many were assembled together and praying. When he knocked on the door of the entrance gate, a maid named Rhoda came to answer. Although she recognized Peter's voice, out of joy she did not open the gate but ran in and announced that Peter was standing in front of the gate. They said to her, "You're crazy," but she kept insisting it was so, but they were saying, "It is his angel." But Peter kept on knocking. When they opened the gate, they saw him and were amazed. But he motioned with his hand for them to be silent, and he explained to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. He said, "Go tell these things to Jacob and the brothers." Then he left and went to another place. When they came, there was no small commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. After Herod made a search for him and did not find him, he interrogated the guards and commanded that they be led away to execution. Then he went down from Judea and stayed in Caesarea. Now it happened that Herod was furious with the people of Tyre and Sidon. So they came to him united. Having won over Blastus, the king's personal aide, they began asking for peace because their country was supplied with food from the king's country. On a appointed day, Herod donned his royal robes and, taking a seat upon the throne, began to make a speech to them. The people were shouting, "The voice of God and not a human." Immediately, an angel of the Lord struck him down because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and died. But the word of God kept on growing and multiplying, and Barnabas and Saul returned to Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their service, taking along John, who was also called Mark.